I'll yield 5 minutes to myself for some questions, and then we'll move through the panel as well. Big scheme of things, I believe in free trade, trading with countries throughout the world for all the reasons we've talked about. The problem is always, as my friends have said, the devil is in the details. There may be something in an agreement that we don't like for a lot of reasons, politically, economically, human rights, whatever. We got TPA, that's, I think, Ambassador, you said has been approved 18 times in the last 30, 40, 60, 80 years.
70 years.
70 years, thank you, Ambassador. And then we have TTIP and TPP. We start with the Trade Promotional Authority. Congress has to approve that, and there's some cynicism in Congress because we can't get much information from the administration. We've asked the administration 8 times to testify before our Committee on Foreign Affairs. I spoke with Mr. Michael Froman in 2013 was the first time he promised me he would give me a private briefing. Well, we hadn't had it yet. So there's some skepticism or suspicion, if you will, about what's taken place, because Congress then has the problem of, well, do we give the administration the TPA, Trade Promotional Authority, but we're not really getting much information out of the administration on what the end game is with these 2 trade agreements. Ambassador, can you help us out a little bit about what's going on with the administration and whether we should press that issue a little more, or is that just the way it is? Microphone. Button.
When I served, I spent a good deal of time with my friends on the Hill, both in this body and in the Senate. I found having executive sessions with those who were interested, and often it's hard to get Congress to be interested, but an executive session is useful. And I say that because when you're negotiating, whether you're negotiating to buy your house or your car, you want to keep your negotiations not public. You don't want them on the front page of the newspaper so the person you're negotiating with knows what your strategy is. But Congress and the executive branch must have a collaborative arrangement. I can tell you it works. I could not have done the negotiations that we did without my friends on the Hill. And yet they understood that it was necessary not to publicize so widely what we were trying to get from multiple governments, because even what you want to get from government A may offend government B. And so any negotiation requires some degree of discretion.
Right.
So I would encourage you to have executive sessions, and I am certainly happy to encourage Mr. Froman to meet more often with you. I am shocked that you say you have not seen him since 2013.
Well, for a briefing, that's correct. I appreciate that insight. And moving on to the specifics of the 2 agreements, let me just talk about Europe. Dr. Hamilton, anybody else can weigh in on this as well. When I visited Ukraine, the President told me that he sure would like to see some natural gas coming from the United States. 2009, I think the Russians turned the gas off for 2 weeks in the winter. It was cold because I happened to be there and for part of that time. And I understand the economic hostage that the Europeans feel. You hear it in what they say because they're very careful about saying things to me, it seems like, to offend the Russians because they're getting their energy from them. So, and just theory, not the details of an agreement with transatlantic partnership. How would that help economically Europe, but also help economically the United States if we dealt with energy, for example?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you're absolutely right. Energy is a really important part of this relationship. The quick answer would be that a TTIP would enable us to go around some of those onerous requirements you were mentioning, the Department of Energy and so on, because if we have a free trade agreement with partners, much of that opens up. But it doesn't quite do the job. My critique at the current TTIP is that there is a discussion about a proposed energy chapter, but both sides have not quite embraced it. And it's not only about free flow of energy in the trade sense, because many on the U.S. side would say, well, if we get the trade deal, it frees up all of those problems, so what's the issue? Why do we have to have a chapter? I think it goes more to this point about standards and norms. If we could agree across the Atlantic on some basic principles governing energy trade to strengthen the rules-based order, that would become a core global benchmark. And Ukraine is a good example. We have currently, across the Atlantic, for instance, non-controversial, the basic principle that when a monopoly owns a pipeline, third parties have mandatory access to that pipeline. That we agree. In the United States, we agree. In Europe, it's not a global principle. And you can imagine if we could enshrine that as a principle, what it would mean for a country like Ukraine. Because it would start to raise the bar in terms of how we engage. So those types, setting the bar higher because of how we work with the Europeans is really an important part of TTIP that goes beyond opening up just the transatlantic market. But we could do that at the same time. That would provide huge benefits for U.S. energy producers. You see, the other argument was about Asian prices being far higher than in Europe, but that has now changed. And the political signal to those who have to invest in infrastructure over a 5-10-year period happens today. They don't invest for 5-10 years if they don't get the political signal now. And that's why the third element of why that's so important.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. My time has expired. I'll yield to the ranking member from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.